All right, everyone. Everyone's all up in arms about the Gorshkov being docked in Havana right now in Cuba. It's a Russian warship. It's capable of firing supposedly hypersonic missiles, etc., etc. Everyone's getting it wrong, and it reminds me of the Nicaragua Canal. I'll point out what I think Russia's doing here, and then we'll draw that particular comparison. It was a victory for China, actually, in the end, despite the fact that the canal was never actually built at all. What Russia's doing, I think, in Cuba right now is gently reminding the Western world about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Basically, they dock a warship there. They say, okay, we are capable of doing this. We do have force projection capabilities. We have a blue water navy. It's more limited than the United States Navy and certainly the various NATO forces. But we do have it, and we've got an ally there in the Caribbean, and we're capable of docking there. We're friendly with them. They're reminding us of those diplomatic relations. The comparison is, in my opinion, a little similar to the Nicaragua Canal. At the time that it was proposed, I correctly pointed out that it would never be built, because building it was never the point. It was meant to run a foil to build a small Chinese military base in the Central American region, number one, and number two, to score a diplomatic victory. What China did is it went in with all of these big, bold-sounding plans. Well, we're going to make a canal that'll rival the Panama Canal, which at the time was literally undergoing a major upgrade and expansion. So making a new canal would not have been necessary anyway. And then I put two and two together and figured out, well, if that's not the reason, then what is? Oh, that's right, they want this military base. Plus, then they can also score several diplomatic victories at the same time. And they don't even need to build a canal. The proposal for the canal would have flooded out a bunch of farmers. Naturally, they're going to protest, right? China played its cards right with the Nicaragua Canal bullshit. Then they can back off and say, well, I guess it won't work in the end after all. You've got your military base. You get to point to Uncle Sam and say, look, they barge into countries and they do things against the populace will. We're backing off because we understand your grievances and there's no way to do this, and so, you know, it's all good. Then they also get to ingratiate themselves with the Nicaraguan government because they pump so much money into the country. And China has a lot of money and fixes its currency values and stuff like that. China won several victories at once. It's not entirely clear what Russia's end goal is here other than a spectacle, effectively. I think that it's mainly to increase diplomatic tensions in the American hemisphere by simply pointing out, okay, you've got NATO forces right on our border. We're capable of putting our forces, you know, within proximity to Florida, and look at our scary ship that can fire missiles that you can't take down out of the sky with an anti-missile system. It's basically an intimidation tactic. People are acting like it's the dawn of World War III. Tensions right now between the West and the East are high, admittedly. Cuba's probably not going to be, I mean, it's not the 1960s anymore. I don't think that Cuba is going to be the flashpoint for a nuclear crisis. It's possible. Russia could, in theory, start building missile systems in Cuba again, or putting up some sort of weaponry. It's possible. But it doesn't seem like that's the intent. It seems like the intent is to force the U.S. Navy to sort of circle the area and monitor the situation at great, great expense. I mean, we're talking about a relatively small military presence by the Russians in a country where they already had a diplomatic presence anyway, a country we've semi-normalized relations with. I think they just took Cuba off of the list of countries that directly promote terrorism, if I remember correctly, or something to that effect. I think that was only a few weeks ago, actually. Coincidental timing, by the way. Russia's probably seeking also to simply maintain its relations with the Cubans. Because, again, if you've got a warming of relations between Cuba and the U.S., to an extent, they're right next door. Russia wants to make sure that its foreign asset, its foreign pawn, doesn't end up in the Western hands, effectively. So they put on a show of force to tell the Cubans, look, haha, we've got big ships. And to tell the United States, hey, you remember that time back in the 1960s where we almost came to blows? And by the way, it was one of our under-sub commanders that prevented World War III for real, like in actuality. You remember that incident? Let's not replicate that. Let's talk with one another. Also, you've got a little bit of a temporary, not a ceasefire, but withholding of use of force by Israel in Gaza right now. A strategic pause, they're calling it, to allow aid corridors to open up. Very interesting, all these things happening at once, by the way. I think this is a feint. I don't think that it has anything to do with Russia literally attempting to establish a significant presence in the Caribbean region. I look at it mainly as similar to the Nicaragua Canal. And I think I was the only commentator who called it on the Nicaragua Canal. I had so many people who were saying, well, China is replacing the United States. Now the Panama Canal will be useless. The Nicaragua Canal will be bigger. I don't think the original plan actually would have made it bigger than the upgraded Panama Canal. And nobody's going to use it anyway. It wouldn't make any sense because it would have to be twice as long. But they all swore up and down that was the goal. And I told them, no, that's not the end goal. The end goal is the military base. And China did successfully construct it. That's about all. Peace out.